You know, every time we have a hurricane threat, which is usually every hurricane season, we prepare both at the diocesan level and then also at the school level. So we have a process in place, and we had a really good process. You know, a disaster response team with all of the offices within the diocese, planning, communication, planning, you know, who was going to be where and what would happen when we returned. And then it hit. And this was a hurricane like none of us had ever experienced in our lives. So the plans, of course, were great. The plans were well thought out. And when we all came back, there were many challenges that no one expected, or not to the degree that we had them. Probably the biggest challenge was communication. So, you know, some people stayed, some of us evacuated, and we came back very quickly after the storm, within the day after the storm. And the biggest worry was how your people were, the people you work with, your family members, the children from our schools. Getting in communication with everyone was so difficult. And that was the biggest challenge by far. And in the midst of it, just the incredible vast destruction throughout the diocese, throughout our areas. It was surreal to see. And getting to be able to physically going from place to place, and the struggles of the physical properties that you had to, you know, find a way to get to, find a creative way to get to make sure that, you know, principals were okay or your pastors were okay, and that they had some communication. That was the biggest challenge at first. It was unbelievable. You know, we've been through hurricanes, you know, been through several hurricanes in my life, but I think just the distance throughout the diocese, just the enormous span of this hurricane is what made such a difference. And seeing the schools, seeing roofs ripped off, seeing windows gone, seeing books and the hard work of our teachers and our children and our administrators in our schools, and immediately thinking, what are we going to do? How are we going to get our students back in this Catholic school environment as quickly as we can? Those very thoughts of, you know, how were we going to get our students back? We knew people would be displaced. People's houses were destroyed. So we had people out of state, people stuck out of state. My thoughts were, what are we going to do with the properties that we do have, or potential properties? And those were my thoughts. You know, what can we do? Because we know our children need to be in that structured environment in school. We know their parents were dealing with, you know, massive destruction in their homes in many cases. And what can we do, and how can we do this the safest way? Because that's our main focus when we're bringing children back after a disaster, is their safety, our students and our staff. Right. You know, the damage at some schools was greater than others. All of our schools were impacted. All 11 schools were impacted. From the minimal impact in Morgan City at Central Catholic, which was a blessing, they escaped most of the wrath of the storm. Mostly it was just very cosmetic and trees, limbs down. So they were okay. But as we moved to schools such as Holy Rosary in La Rose, Holy Savior in Lockport, Vanderbilt Catholic in Houma, we looked at these schools and we knew right away they're not going to be able to return to these facilities for quite some time. So what can we do? How can we bring these children back in school? And we had talked about some of these things prior in our disaster response team meetings. What were some ideas? And one of those is a platooning, where students share a facility and to have different time slots or different days to share. That was one possibility. I reached out to even our public school systems, and they're in the same boat that we are. So we were all struggling to find facilities, and that was a huge challenge. But We were blessed. I received 2 calls within days of each other. And the first was from Father Cody Chotnier of St. Anne Catholic Church in Berg. And he has a beautiful facility, a life center at St. Anne. And it was built in 2013. And there are classrooms with smart TVs in them, up to code. And he offered for St. Gregory to be able to use those facilities, those classroom facilities, until they could return to their own physical plant, to their own St. Gregory school. That was such a blessing. That I just can't put into words how much that means to me. You know, as an educator, how much it means to parents, to our diocese for that offer. And we were able to make that work. And then the second call was from Father J.D. Mathern at St. Hilary. St. Hilary Catholic School closed in the early 90s. However, they have kept that facility very, very well because they do utilize it for their faith formation, for their youth formation classes. So we were able to have Holy Savior from Lockport utilize St. Hilary's facilities, where they still are today. So both of those schools, St. Gregory and Holy Savior, were able to relocate until their physical plants are safe again for their students' return. The other opportunity for us was to find, the challenge was to find Vanderbilt Catholic, one of our largest schools and one of our high schools, a place for them to relocate. That's a much larger school than a Holy Savior or St. Gregory. So that was a little more difficult. And we were able to work with EDY Catholic in Thibodaux so that they could platoon. And the administrators of both schools, the principals and presidents, worked together to determine how best to do that and what was in the best interest of the students and staff. So they alternated days until a period where Vanderbilt Catholic could return to their physical plant and utilize a portion of it while work continued. And so today they are back at their physical plant, and they will rotate throughout their school as necessary while repairs are being made. You know, I think just seeing the good in people, seeing people put their faith in action, from children to our students in our schools, their parents, our parishioners, just seeing people, just the compassion and the giving of people to each other. You know, in the early days, it was a lot of disaster response, and we're still in that mode in the diocese in the harder hit areas. But in those first days, it was making sure people had food, that they had water, that they had shelter, and working in some of those distribution points, and you offer things to people and they don't want to take a whole pack of something because someone else is going to need part of that. Just really seeing people care for one another and to just truly put their faith in action. That's been the silver lining in all of this. I think people coming together to help each other. What I want people to know most about our schools post-Ida is the resilience and the opportunity to truly see people put their faith in action. We have seen our students, our faculty, our staff, our parishioners, our parents, our workers within the diocese, we have seen them truly live their faith. And there's no greater opportunity than in a time of need like a disaster such as Hurricane Ida. So I want people to know that the beauty that is in the hearts of all of our people was spread throughout this diocese and continues to be. And that is going to need to continue because our suffering is not over. And I know that in the beginning, many times in disasters, people think of those first few weeks when it's in the news, it's all over national news, even international news, and then something else takes its place. But the reality is we still have many students who are displaced. We have many workers, many of our teacher ministers, our administrator ministers who have family or even personally are still displaced, who may be living in campers right now or living with a relative or friend. So there's still a long road ahead towards recovery, but our people are resilient people. And through all of this, they are happy to be together again in our schools, and they're happy to help each other.